Hi, I'm Breonna Harris, and this is my presentation, The Duality of Love Within Caravaggio's Victorious Cupid. Caravaggio, the renowned Italian Baroque artist, shocked many with his naturalistic and suggestive depiction of Cupid in the painting Victorious Cupid, also known as Amor vincit omnia, meaning love conquers all. Legs spread with a playful grin and flushed cheeks, Cupid stands triumphantly and completely nude over symbols of 17th century authority and intellectualism, such as armor, a crown, instruments, and mathematical tools, among other items. Holding two differently fletched arrows and wielding a bow with a broken string, the Cupid on display in Victorious Cupid demonstrates love's irreverence for humanity while harkening back to ancient Greek iconography. In our time today, it is my goal to examine the symbolism and literature around the figure Cupid and how Caravaggio reframes it in a 17th century perspective. To fully appreciate the historical iconography in Victorious Cupid, we must have an understanding of who the god Cupid is. In short, Cupid is the Roman counterpart of the Greek god Eros, and they both share similar origins and attributes. Cupid is the child of Mars, the god of war, and Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. So right from conception, Cupid was inherently born of contradiction. Initially, war and love seem to be at odds, yet both are manifested through intense passion and emotion. In this way, it is easy to understand why Cupid gets characterized as being very mischievous and multifaceted. As for the iconography associated with Cupid, he is often portrayed as a young child or adolescent, potentially to emphasize his mischievous and playful nature. There is also ancient literature by the classic Roman poet Ovid that further emphasizes Cupid's dual nature and his propensity to mischief. In his 8 CE poem titled Metamorphoses, Ovid tells a story of Phoebus, also known as Apollo, and the river nymph Daphne, and how they both get shot by Cupid's arrows. The story begins with Phoebus, the slayer of the large serpent Python, taunting Cupid about how only strong deities like himself should be allowed to wield a bow. In retaliation, Cupid shoots Phoebus with an arrow of love, and Phoebus's romantic interest Daphne with an arrow of disdain, thus pitting the two against each other. The story ends with Phoebus chasing down Daphne as she was alone in the wilderness. As he attempts to grab her, she prays to her father for help and suddenly begins to transform into a laurel tree, which thus saves her from Phoebus's assault. The renowned Baroque artist Bernini depicts this scene in which Daphne is in mid-transformation. But what the story essentially reveals is Cupid's ability to incite love, albeit a dangerous and violent love, as well as his potential to incite disdain and sorrow, a power which allows him to undermine the authority of another major god. Ultimately, the story provides an excellent archetype of Cupid's nature, and his inclination towards chaos serves as further evidence of the duality which Greco-Romans regarded this deity. But why were artists in the Baroque 17th century, such as Caravaggio, interested in these ancient narratives of Greek and Roman gods? In part, it's due to the Copernican revolution. In the previous 16th century, Copernicus, an astronomer and mathematician, proposed that the Earth revolves around the sun. With his discovery, Copernicus incited a massive cultural shift in which science began to take precedence. Another influence on Baroque artists was the Enlightenment, which began in Europe in the later part of the 17th century. The Enlightenment was a period in which intellectualism, reason, and philosophy flourished. With all the scientific discoveries and intellectual insights gained in this period, it inspired artists to revisit themes of old, such as mythology, religious scenes, and portraiture, but with their newly informed 17th century perspectives. Artists at the time worked to exceed previous limitations within art and experiment with the use of dramatic light and shadow, composition, space, and movement. All of this is to say, the Baroque period was full of innovation, and artists like Caravaggio wanted to use these revolutionary perspectives to redefine, recreate, and even surpass the classic representations of these concepts within art. Now, all of this information brings us back to the artist we're discussing today, Caravaggio. While benefiting from a flourishing and advancing society, Caravaggio himself was considered to be a bit of a troublemaker and unintellectual. Caravaggio earned these titles through the numerous crimes he committed and by his unconventional artistic practices. For instance, Caravaggio never made preparatory sketches on the canvas before he began painting. Instead, he scratched guidelines into the paint on his canvas and improvised as he went. This method allowed for what other artists believed were unnecessary mistakes that led to excessive use of paint. It was so heavily frowned upon that other artists and writers at the time publicly called into Caravaggio's intellectual ability. Still, while his peers may have disparaged his technical and academic acumen, when viewing Caravaggio's Victorious Cupid, these claims become harder to substantiate. And that brings us finally to the painting Victoria's Cupid. Commissioned by Marchese Giustiniani, a prominent and affluent art collector in Italy, Caravaggio's controversial Cupid was widely considered the best work in Giustiniani's collection. It was considered so sensational that Giustiniani hid the painting behind a curtain in his home. While the concealment of Victoria's Cupid was partially done to protect the modesty of women, it was also said to have been done to avoid overshadowing the other works in the collection. But for a greater testament to the quality of the work, let us turn to the rich detailing and the balance of power and impotence presented by Caravaggio. Immediately, we notice the mischievous grin upon Cupid's face and the adolescent proportions of his body and genitals. To borrow from Ovid's Metamorphoses, this is the Cupid that Phoebus perceives as weak and unworthy. However, just as Phoebus's false perception is broken, so too is the audience's as we begin to notice the objects which Caravaggio has chosen to surround Cupid. At his feet lie a suit of armor, instruments, mathematical tools, and other symbols of culture, science, and authority. Quite literally, some of the greatest achievements of mankind fall at the feet of this impish boy. At the same time, he is unbothered and even arrogantly assured in his victory. This is the Cupid with all-encompassing might who could bend the will of a mighty god like Phoebus. Yet, if there is nothing else that can show Caravaggio's understanding of the classical Greco-Roman literature and history, and more specifically, Cupid's duality within that culture, one need to only look at Cupid's signature weapon, his bow and arrow. Once again, Cupid is presented as both ill-equipped, yet armed and ready, and if one looks closely, the string upon his bow is frayed and broken. What presents itself more unassuming or perhaps arrogant than a smug archer with a broken bow? Still, underneath the facade, Caravaggio once again unveils the might of this god by having Cupid wield the true symbols of his power, the twin arrows of love and despair, the same which brought Phoebus and Daphne to ruin. Although considered a rogue, there is no denying the effort and detail Caravaggio put into Victoria's Cupid, a work truly indicative of the Baroque philosophy of surpassing the past. Victoria's Cupid authentically revives Greco-Roman tradition and accurately embraces Cupid's form as a mischievous imp of a god, torn between a father of war and a mother of love. Caravaggio captures these ideals both in Cupid's expression, his dominance and irreverence to the objects around him, and through tailored allusions to classic Greco-Roman literature and iconography. In the end, perhaps Ovid said it best, "And by the measure that thy might exceeds the broken powers of thy defeated foes, so is thy glory less than mine." Thank you.